Arriving in the small port town of Safaga, we have a panoramic view of the desert mountains to the west. Our journey to Luxor and the Valley of the Kings will take us through these mountains to the Nile River Valley. Our bus caravan is ready, and we depart following Route 60 through the mountains and then parallel to the river until we reach Luxor. The mountains have a rugged beauty, and it's hard to imagine anything or anyone living here. But we learn that the roots of the scrub brush can go down 65 feet, so anywhere you see bushes, you know there is water below the surface. We arrive in the town of Kina in the Nile River Valley. It is a dramatic change from the desert mountains, as we are now surrounded by cultivated fields and trees and village life with old and new buildings. There were also many people resting in the shade or working in their fields or riding in vehicles. Or just walking or standing on the road. Observing them, I tried to imagine what they were doing and thinking in an attempt to gain an insight into their daily lives and culture. We follow the canal that parallels the river. It was dug in 3000 BC and is 300 miles long. It extends the cultivated area of the valley and acts as a reservoir during the dry season. At every intersection there is a private armed security person paid by the local farmers. He knows everyone and makes sure that nothing illegal is happening. These are separate from the police. We now enter Luxor, known originally as Wasat and later as Thebes. It was founded in 3200 BC and has been a religious center much of that time. It contains 25% of all of the externally displayed antiquities in the world. We arrived at our first destination, the Karnak Temple Complex. Around 2050 BC, Mentuhotep II unified ancient Egypt and built the first temple here. Almost every succeeding pharaoh added to the temple, including Seti I, Ramses II, and ending with Nectanebo I in 379 BC. Entering the site, you see the first pylon, which was the last structure to be built in 360 BC. The walls were never completed or decorated, and there are still signs of the ramps that were built to lift the stones. At the time it was built, the entrance would have looked like this. The stones in this wall weigh up to 2,000 pounds, but studies have shown that if you build a 5% grade mud ramp and make it wet and slippery, 4 to 6 men can drag a stone of this weight to the top of the wall. On either side of the entryway are a row of pylon sphinxes with rams' heads on lions' bodies, symbolizing the god Amun. Each has a small statue of Ramses II between their paws. There is a boat ramp on the right side, built at a time when the river was much higher, and the water level came up to this point. Around the entire site are the remnants of a high wall. This is actually the newest construction on the site, having been built at approximately 370 BC, but it has deteriorated the quickest. Beyond the first pylon is the remains of a huge kiosk built in 690 BC that originally consisted of 10 67-foot-high columns, of which only one remains today. Here is how they might have looked. Nearby is a statue of Ramses II, with arms crossed holding the flail, symbol of kingship. At his feet is his daughter, Princess Bant Antha, holding a flower and wearing a crown of cobras. Beyond the next wall is the hypostyle hall, which is perhaps the most remarkable site in the complex. It was built by the pharaoh Seti I in 1290 BC and consists of 134 columns which were 80 feet tall, covering an area of 54,000 square feet, which makes it the largest religious building ever built. Many other pharaohs added inscriptions to the columns, including Ramses II, who completed the southern side. The capitals form an open papyrus flower and were called open flower papyrus columns. As built, the hall would have looked like this. There are still areas on the underside of the crossbeams where the original drawings can be seen. Here is a depiction of how the hall would have been painted. Our guide explains how to read a hieroglyph cartouche identifying a pharaoh.
Ground, and then comes above the ground again from the east and continue. The king owns everything from the ground to the sky, and the sun protects him. So that is the name of the king. And our name here is the name of a king called Moses. And he was a fighter and he invaded many cities.
The entire adjoining wall is covered with the cartouche names of cities conquered by Pharaoh Thutmoses. Our last stop in Karnak was at the Thutmoses I obelisk and the Queen Hatshepsut obelisk, which are 77 and 97 feet high respectively and weigh over 200 tons. Each was carved from a single piece of pink granite and transported hundreds of miles before being erected. Carving, moving, and placing these stones was an amazing engineering feat. We left Karnak and made the short journey across the river to the Valley of the Kings. Between 1539 and 1075 BC, this valley, which is below sacred Mount El Quan, was where all pharaohs and nobility were buried. There are 63 known graves here, all dug deep into the side of the mountain, with the most elaborate being 700 feet long with 120 rooms. The tombs contained all of the possessions they would need to again be pharaoh when they arrived in the world of the dead. All have long ago been robbed and their contents removed. The drawings on the walls are all that remain, but they provide some insight into the beliefs of the people who were buried here. Some drawings show the pharaoh giving offerings to the gods. Others reference the holy books, including the Book of Earth, the Book of Gates, and the Book of the Holy Cow. Drawings often make reference to a journey by boat with the sun god to the next world. There are many drawings of snakes, and we learn that some snakes are good and help the pharaoh travel to the next world, while others are bad and prevent him from making the journey. The pharaohs also added drawings describing the accomplishment of their rule, as well as the accomplishments that they pursued but did not achieve. We left the tombs for our return journey to the ship, but made a brief stop at the Colossus of Memnon. Here we saw two 26-foot sandstone statues of Pharaoh Amenhotep III, which were cut from a single piece of stone and somehow moved 150 miles from the quarry. Their purpose was to guard an 86-acre temple, which is mostly destroyed now, but was the largest ever built. The Colossus statues suffered severe damage from earthquakes and erosion, and as a result the face of Amenhotep cannot be recognized, but this is what he would have looked like. From there it was back to Safaga to rejoin the ship.